morning. Hello there. Kia ora. Hope everyone's doing okay. Sorry, I just had this big flashy thing pop up on screen saying the Facebook stream has decided not to work all of a sudden. Yay, technology. So I've just gone and posted that on there. So I hope everybody can get to wherever this is streaming. Thank you very much for joining me. This is the first time I've done a Sunday morning stream. So let's see how that goes. I hope everybody has their coffee. Should do some housekeeping before everybody starts. Hopefully they will show up fairly soon. Who knows? It's Sunday morning. I don't expect it to be overly busy. And seeing some interesting comments come through. Some great comments about last night's BHN debate. That was a really fascinating thing to sit back and watch. There's 3 more of those coming up as well for people who are keen to go along. The next one on August the 15th is here in Tamaki. I'm actually going to be doing what Bree did last night and doing the questions from the crowd for that one. So feel free to come along. Super easy to find all the details on the BHN website, but we're not here about BHN. We're here to talk about something a little different. We're here to talk about the Free Speech Union. And I am sure that there are going to be people who get all uppity and pro Free Speech Union, and that's fine. That's their choice. Oh, there's hair floating in front of the camera. That's their choice. That's not what we're doing here. We're not bad-mouthing the Free Speech Union as such. What we're doing is a media analysis of how the Free Speech Union basically got themselves throughout the media this week. So I'm going to run a bit of a poll. Now, the polls are really simple if you haven't come across this before. The question for this one is, have you seen the Free Speech Union in the news this week? And you just type the answer 1, 2, or 3, yes, no, or not sure. And that pops up in the chat, and we'll have a look at that a little bit later in the week. I also am a little bit scratchy. I woke up this morning with a sore throat, so I'm sucking on a lozenge and drinking coffee, which I'm sure is going to be a great mix. All right, so just a couple of quick housekeeping things before we get started. There are going to be some interactive questions that come out throughout this episode because I kind of want everybody thinking about how media works, what's being presented to them, and how it makes them feel or makes them see things in a certain way, because that's what media agenda setting is. There is the poll. You can respond to that in the comment section, which is super easy. And we're here to answer a really simple core question. It is, how does an organization framing itself as a civil liberties defender operate as a political flak machine? It influences state appointments and shifts the public debate away from facts towards culture war narratives. So, it's it's weird. Also, Stack Skill, I don't know. It doesn't tell me. It doesn't have a thing next to names. So I don't know why you might have popped off there. So I apologize. I can look into that after this, and hopefully things get sorted. So I'm going to show you guys some stats, because that's always a fun thing to do. Let's go for that button there. Add to stage. Right. I got this off Open Brief, which I don't know if you guys have come across the site yet. Yes, Big Olby. Yes. The AstroTurfing is one of their tools. They are an AstroTurf organization by the sheer dint of what the definition of AstroTurf is. It is an organization that lobbies on behalf of clientele that you don't know who it is. So they don't make their finances fully public. So that is by definition an AstroTurf. So yeah, that is a really important thing to remember about the Free Speech Union. I should also point out this is going to go out as a podcast tomorrow because, again, sore throat. I don't have to re-record anything that way. People messaging me this morning. It's all good. So let's have a look at some stats here. The Free Speech Union media reached this last week. This is all from openbrief.co.nz. If you haven't had a chance to look at this yet, it is a great resource for being able to track how media works, who's presenting what the feedback's been, what the public have been saying. I love this tool. Like it is absolutely brilliant. Their numbers showed that last week we saw 29 press releases from the Free Speech Union. 24 of them were carried by media organizations, and 13 of them led a news story. So they weren't part of another story, they were the lead of it. And it's kind of scary to think that this is the level of reach they've got. Some other organizations will be lucky to have, 5 to 10% of their releases being picked up by media. For this one here, you're looking at 90% of all of their releases are being carried by media in some way. That is a lot of influence. So it's a bit scary when that happens. So I figured this is a really good time to look into that influence. All right, so We're going to be taking a look at a couple of different things throughout today, which will only be an hour. I got some logos, some icons for you. So we're going to be taking a look at a bit of the propaganda model and how the Free Speech Union fits into that, into something called agenda setting theory, which is dictating what the public thinks about. We're going to be taking a look at framing theory, which is selecting and emphasizing specific problem definitions. There's gatekeeping theory, which is filtering who gets access to public discourse and decision-making. There's cultivation theory, which is long-term media exposure creating a perceived reality. And then there's the spiral of silence, which is basically fear of isolation, suppressing minority viewpoints. And they are all really obvious if you know what you're looking for in this week's topic and around the Free Speech Union and how they all work. So let's dive into it, shall we? All right. So anybody want to hazard a guess in the comment section while I'm doing this and having a quick drink as to which media outlet carried the most Free Speech Union, it says TPU, Free Speech Union content this week? But to be fair, the Taxpayers Union and the Free Speech Union, basically the same organization. They're all run by the campaign company. So yeah, it's all good. Oh, I hope the open home goes well, Kiwi Skirt. Good luck with that. Yeah, so anyone want to hazard a guess which outlet carried the most? And to be fair, for both TPU and Free Speech Union, it was the same outlet. See, and this is really fascinating. Since Herald, absolutely, I would think that too. Yep, Herald makes sense. ZB definitely makes sense. But it was actually Radio New Zealand, RNZ, our unbiased public media outlet, carried 5 times more Free Speech Union and Taxpayer Union content than the Herald. And this is looking specifically at the Free Speech Union, what was their top list according to Open Brief. Herald at number 5. Point of Order is a right-wing political blog that talk about things like why poor people should be grateful that they're poor. The Taxpayer Union and the Free Speech Union reference themselves in quite a bit of content as well, including their own podcasts and media that they put out there. The Spin-Off references it, but it tends to reference it in a what are they thinking kind of way instead of a platforming it specifically kind of way. And Radio New Zealand platforms it like uncritically. It just goes, here is something that the union has given us. And that's really concerning because they're supposed to be public media, they're supposed to be unbiased, and what they're doing is basically being handed content. And this is part of what we call the Atlas framework. It's how they work. They provide content that shares their ideological viewpoint to media, and media having no resources, having a lack of skill set in there because they are underfunded. You know, when Winston or David goes, we're going to cut your funding, this is some of the offsets of that. This is what happens. So when a media outlet is handed something that's ready to go, a lot of the times they do that. Radio New Zealand does that on quite an alarming regular basis. So it's a little creepy, really creepy. All right, let's take a look at the next one. This is called the FLAC engine. Now, under the propaganda model, there's a whole range of things that will dictate how media is crafted and how it's presented. And one of those roles is FLAC. Well, basically, you know, we're going to make something look bad and you don't want to be the thing that looks bad. And we call that the FLAC engine. So we're looking at this really specific aspect of it. So yeah, there's not a union makes perfect sense here. And this one here about they used to be reliable. Radio New Zealand has the potential to be amazing. And I really wish, like, there are some great people. John Campbell's on there, and he is absolutely brilliant, for example. But the way that they work and operate at the moment is on a shoestring. So it is really problematic. This one here as well from Big Ol, we can't remember who runs RNZ, could be a new direction for the election campaigns. Feel free to throw questions in here. I am doing this by myself, so I hope I see them all. RNZ is run by a board, and the board is actually changing over at the moment. Like, we're in the process of changing over. The current CEO is also in charge of editorial decisions, and they've decided when he steps down or is stepping down, that they're going to put in place somebody who's in charge of editorial specifically, as well as a CEO. So it becomes two roles. We've already seen in other media where they have editorial decision-making processes like the Herald. When Jim Grennan tried to take over the Herald, one of his criteria for not doing that was to be able to put in an editorial council. And on that editorial council include people like Stephen Joyce, somebody who used to work as Christopher Luxon's PR person, like head of PR. Like, there's some really clear right-wing voices choosing what the editorial decisions are of the Herald. We're going to start seeing already the editorial choices coming through from RNZ in the same way. The person that they've chosen, he seems like a relatively competent manager, to be honest. The thing that raised a red flag for me on him was the number of people on the right going, "Oh, the left are not going to like this," when he goes in. I don't know much about him, to be honest. So it's going to be fascinating to sit down and see how that rolls out over the next couple of weeks. But funding is a big one. The more funding, the more you can do, is pretty much what it boils down to. But because it's a public entity, it's not designed to make a profit. And because we have a right-wing government in there who's all about profit, the two aren't always compatible. And we've seen that with David Seymour and Winston Peters both threatening funding for the organization at times. So yeah, it is what it is pretty much what it boils down to. And if we had a left-wing government in there that was able to fund it better, then you'd probably see a shift in how editorial works, but also just having that skill set and the staffing numbers to be able to go, okay, here's a press release, let's do some research into it, let's offer some alternative views, which we don't have at the moment. So yeah, so the flak engine. This is basically where media is used to beat up or be beaten up by organizations. These are actual headlines that ran last week. Labour accuses Simeon Brown of using personal troll farm to attack reporter but Prime Minister relaxed about matter. He's so relaxed. He's even relaxed about racism. So yeah, it's very, very interesting there. We've also got Free Speech Union attacks reporter asking minister questions, and Free Speech Union says the Post's medical council questions not genuine. Reporting is tripe. So if you want a bit of a rundown on what actually happened, like if you're not up to speed with this, we'll go into that in just a sec. But first question for you that I think is something that we should all be asking: how should journalists cover public appointments when political groups use immediate public attacks to deflect scrutiny? I would love to get your feedback on this one. I don't know the answer to this one. Like, in an ideal world, it would be ignore the political groups that are doing the attacks, but they have influence, and that's a real problem we should all be very concerned about. Don't mind me, coffee's so good. All right, so how did this all happen? First of all, this is Andrea Vance. She is a reporter for Stuff. She has done some really interesting work, particularly around that alt-right conspiracy theory field. I know she did quite a bit during 2023 elections and a bit in the 2025 local body elections around the conspiracy theorists that were running in those kind of spheres that they were in. Also, if you haven't seen it, there was a great piece that came out in the press, I think, talking about white supremacists and who's behind some of the big remigration stuff here. Really fascinating how much they're like, New Zealand First is the tops. So yeah, if you get a chance, check that out. Charlie Mitchell does some very good stuff. So anyway, Andrea Vance, she is a reporter who sat down and went, wait a second, there's been a couple of appointments that don't seem to quite fit right for the medical council. Now, you may recall Simeon Brown decided to not hire or not reinstate a couple of people from the medical council over what he called ideological reasons. And they included things like making sure that there was equitable outcomes for Māori and that people had access to things like puberty blockers, trans healthcare, and abortion access. So he said, no, ideology bad, because that's how he thinks, and he has put in place a couple of other appointees. These two appointees are very specifically from the Free Speech Union, and Andrea asked Simeon about that. Goes, hey, what about this link with these two here? Within 2 hours, there was no response from Simeon, but the Free Speech Union had already put out a press release going, "Oh, we're under attack. How dare they do this?" Because there were some serious questions that were raised around a couple of the different people that were involved here. You have, trying to get the names right here, Minoja Kalupaha, and you've got Roderick Mulgan, both of them Free Speech Union linked. Mulgan was a director. I think he might have been the first director or first board member, an international director. And Minoja was actually involved in a Twitter dispute where the Free Speech Union came in and defended her right to say whatever it was that she was saying. It actually got purged fairly fast from the internet. There's been some interesting comments that have been made through other platforms about how difficult she was to deal with around certain topics. For example, one thread I came across on Blue Sky pointed out really specifically that she's really fact phobic and she's really harsh on dealing with people who are overweight. And as a fact person, I'm not a fan of that. But they all had connections to the Free Speech Union. So Andrea questioned this and then got attacked for it. So this is what we call a demonstration of flack. When independent media attempts to investigate a government appointment, the external surrogate group, which is the Free Speech Union in this case, they mobilize and they do it to punish people and to publicly delegitimize the reporter, which creates a barrier to this public interest journalism. Asking this is a legitimate question. Why are there these Free Speech Union people who have been given this appointment, especially after a meeting in 2025? I think that's the next thing I've got on here. So yeah, this is how we end up with the flack engine, with these headlines, because the Free Speech Union is going out of its way to try and delegitimize what it is that the reporting is going on. And that should be a concern. Why would they be so defensive all of a sudden? So what actually happened here was the second Free Speech Union figure was appointed to regulate the doctors after meeting a minister on May 25, 2025. Basically, they went to the minister and said, we want to have a chat. And what they talked about wasn't necessarily publicly disclosed, but for some reason, two people in that meeting are now on the medical board. And it's not to say they're not qualified to be on the medical board. It's not to say what their agenda is there. It's just a very strange coincidence. And that was the questions that Andrea actually raised. It was operational around how the choice was made. And that's a really important question because you also have people like Stephen Rainbow and Dr. Melissa Darby. Stephen Rainbow is our Human Rights Commissioner. Melissa Darby is our Race Relations Commissioner. They were both put in place because ACT was like, hey, Paul Goldsmith, you should probably put these people into this role. There were questions at the time, and it's been decided in court that it was an unlawful appointment to put Stephen Rainbow in there because he wasn't qualified for the position. The questioning that came through showed that he wasn't really the right person for the role. He wasn't really up for it, and he wasn't the person that the government should go with, but Paul Goldsmith still did that. Melissa Darby was actually one of the founders of the Free Speech Union. She stood up and decided that she wanted to bring in, was it Southern and Molyneux? So they could do their racist talk around the country. And we'll get into that a little bit later because that actually ties into the later coverage that we saw. So there are definite reasons to have legitimate questions around whether or not these people have been put in place in some kind of ideological way or what the appointment process is. But that was a bad thing. The Free Speech Union was like, no, we're not going to do that. That is definitely bad. Let's see what my next slide says. All right. So what we're looking at here is what we call a frame swap. Okay. So the media has one set of framing. The Free Speech Union has another set of framing. The media framing is if government is appointing lobbyists and anonymous internet commentators to regulatory boards. And that's a fair question based on what we've seen. But the Free Speech Union is claiming that the media is self-righteous. They're trying to purge and deplatform people for wrong think. And it's really fascinating to sit down and see which media covers it in which ways and whether or not media buys this. So do you think they buy it? Our media coverage this week is actually pretty much split between the two. There is that wrong thing, Free Speech Union attacks reporters, but there's also questions about who's been put in place, why they've been put in place, and what the concerns are that should be raised for the public. Really fairly even split. But if you sit down and look at this on social media, you actually get something really different. You get people going, oh, yeah, Free Speech Union, I'm a fan and I don't think critically, so clearly they're in the right about this. Don't mind me, keep the throat wet. Always lots of fun. Come back to comments. I was doing so well. I got into the flow. Got into the flow there. Yeah, so that's what frame swapping is. So, next question for you. Does the Free Speech Union's involvement in medical regulation align with traditional free speech activism, or is it a new form of political lobbying? Now, the Free Speech Union have already put out a press release this week. I don't think I've got it on here, about how they've always been involved in medicine. A spin-off ran a story this week where they were specifically asking, why is the FSU so interested now in the Medical Council? And their responses, we've always been like this. And that is a real problem. We should be very seriously concerned about this. Well, sorry, early. That's why I've got coffee. All right, so if we take a look at, let me see my notes here. All right, the reporting reveals that the Free Speech Union representatives lobbied Minister Brown in May 2025 regarding conscious rights in healthcare. Oh, there you go, conscious rights in healthcare and a professional disciplinary tribunal. An entity claiming to oppose censorship uses direct political access to secure regulatory seats on the Medical Council, which oversees doctor discipline. The media gatekeeping function here is compromised when the ministers pass press queries directly onto or indirectly to that pressure group, the Free Speech Union, to run defense. So we can sit there and go, what's going on? Why is the Free Speech Union making a comment? Simeon's response was, I did nothing. I passed the questions on to the people involved, and they were involved. We do know, for example, that one of the doctors is friends with Annie O'Brien. There's screenshots of that, and Annie is clearly involved with the Free Speech Union, the Taxpayers Union, and that range of products there. So this is how gatekeeping works, basically. It is a way of making sure that we think things a certain way. And media, in this case, is saying we should be asking questions. And the Free Speech Union, in this case, is going, you shouldn't be asking questions. In fact, asking questions is dumb. And we should never do that. Not at all. See, you're absolutely right. This is exactly a brilliant way to put this. They've always been involved in health and medicine. That what they've done is very clearly gone out of their way to try and get people upset, and they've brought in some professionals in health and medicine fields, or who think they know about health and medicine for specific people. But yeah, it is a very strange way of framing it. Very, very strange. Right, so the news stories here show us two frames, and they kind of clash. Is the government appointing lobbyists, or is self-righteous mainstream media trying to purge it? And the outcome, by adopting frame 2, the Free Speech Union pretty much turns a query about government oversight into a story about media bias. And we sit here going, why are we listening to a story about media bias? People who have got experience in how this is set up and understand how the media machinery can work to set agendas will understand that this is a real concern. But for your average Joe blogs on the street, they're just going to sit there going, well, why is the media so uppity about what Simeon is doing? And we should be really concerned about that as voters and as audience members. Yeah, it is. I like this. NZ Nemesis here, watching from start at 1.5 speed. Time travel. I love it. Absolutely love it. So yeah, that is the problem. So does the Free Speech Union's involvement in medical regulation align with free speech activism? Do doctors in particular, who we have an innate level of trust with, have the same rights to free speech as everybody else? And it is a really difficult question to ask sometimes. Like, we've just dealt with a pandemic where there were a ton of people who were sitting there saying to doctors, you can't say bad things about vaccinations, because of why we need people to go out and get vaccinated. So free speech certainly comes into play in that respect. There's a lot of questions, but is the Free Speech Union the best organization to go out and push that? One of the questions people should be asking themselves all the time about all of these organizations is what gives them their power. And the media in this case is actually what gives these organizations their power. And if the media stop talking to them, yeah, I'm sorry. I am sorry. I know I talk fast. I'm also trying to slow it down a little bit because I can. Yeah. Right. Let's jump on to the next section. Now, is this going to work for me? All right, this is all about what happened in Auckland this week. Now, you may have heard about the Free Speech Union's good faith yarns. Free speech headshot person, I don't know what her official title is, but I always see her photos when it comes to the Free Speech Union, Annie O'Brien. She's been on what she's calling a good faith yarns tour, going all around the country, asking people for money so she can sit there and talk. And, she's had some interesting people sit down and talk with her. So clearly, this is all for good faith. But when it came to Auckland, well, there was a whole bunch of people a bit upset about what they'd done. Annie is a TERF. She is very vocally anti-trans. And the location that they had booked, the Alan Melville Centre, is a proud rainbow support space. So they have for many years supported the rainbow community in a number of ways, and they're very, very welcoming to people across all kinds of different spectrums, different identities, different orientations. But having somebody in that particular space who is anti-trans felt to some people like a really bad combination. So they reached out, they were commenting online, they were talking to people at council about this. And this is where we end up with, again, two very different narratives. You've got the one that came from the Free Speech Union, where Councillor Julie Ferry, who's in charge of community spaces, was trying to cancel a meeting due to their personal beliefs that the speaker was somebody she disagreed with. Whereas what actually happened was concerns were raised with Julie that were passed on to operations to see if better aligned venues existed with the values of the speaker. So this is actually something that a lot of places do, particularly organizations like council. And this is because of what happened with Molyneux and Southern that our Race Relations Commissioner kicked off. Essentially, what happens is councils can't turn around and just cancel an event because they disagree with it. And councillors are aware of this, operations are aware of this. If there is a legitimate safety risk, then they can certainly do something about it. And there have been instances where that has happened in the past, where you've had, I think the example Julie gave was you had a stop co-governance tour stop in one location, and it might have been a pro-treaty organization or something, another in the same building. And so that raises the level of there being a chance of risk. So the events were both cancelled. When it comes to something like this, Julie is well aware of what the rules are, and so are the Free Speech Union, but they're pulling on this whole, we're going to vilify somebody to get our audience up. So it's not really all that good faith when it comes to how they have built this. So this is a really interesting one as well around the media coverage for this. The Free Speech Union had a couple of different media outlets push this. One was the Herald, talking about Auckland councillors warning ahead of Free Speech Union event at council venue. The warning was that she was going to check to see if the venue values matched the speaking tour. The other outlet that covered this was an organization called The Centrist, which is complete misnomer. They are a far-right quote-unquote media outlet. They're basically a far-right blog that was where Jim Grennan got his start when he came here and was making media. The only other media that we've seen that's actually covered what really happened was BHN. Thursday night, I think it was, when I was on there and I was discussing this with Chewy and Ems. Other than that, the media hasn't really done a huge amount of coverage on this, which seems kind of strange when you consider how much spin the Free Speech Union has put into really specifically. Oh, yeah. Oh, I like this idea, actually. Taking it back makes perfect sense. When Annie used to go on Bomber's show, she never looked bothered when he introduced it. Yeah, no, I believe she owns the term. She's quite comfortable with the term. So that's fine. And this is one of the things that I'm also really concerned about, Olby. Older people who are active voters just getting the news online and thinking it's absolute truth, because that's how we've been trained. That's really, really problematic. So what we have here, a whole bunch of Free Speech Union spin. These are all posts that occurred on the Free Speech Union Facebook page, specifically telling people that they tried to be cancelled and gloating about how they sold out their tickets. They sold about 200 tickets. I don't know if they must have been a door fee, because this is all about fundraising. They sold about 200 tickets. The videos that they put out showed about 110 to 130 people, depending on the angle. but they've gone out of their way to try and vilify Julie Ferry in particular as being against free speech because it works so well for them. It has always worked really well for them. So the Free Speech Media Union's media campaign completely filtered out the fact that local community members actually raised safety and inclusivity concerns. And the result of that was erasing the public's voice from the narrative. The event itself was recoded from a community consultation safety issue into an act of top-down political authoritarianism, which is a great way of saying basically they're trying to shut us up. Why are they trying to do that? There's some really interesting content as well that's in there is from Julie. Let's see if we've got her stuff here. So this is what Julie's actual commentary was on the topic. She says she's come to Blue Sky, she's seen this, she chairs the Auckland Council Community Committee and has now emailed the lead council staff members to query this and how staff are going to respond. So she hasn't said anything about cancelling it. She says elected members need to be careful not to be involved in booking decisions directly, but there is a space for raising concerns about whether or not a venue's values match the bookings. At no point does she say that she's going to try and cancel it. At no point does she try and say that it is the fault of any individual or blame anybody in particular or vilify anybody. The two things that she does do, though, that seems to have got people upset is that she has come out saying trans women are women, and she is quite happy to listen to anybody who's got any concerns because that's part of her role. That didn't seem to go down so well with the Free Speech Union, which is where they've led to their very selective framing. I like this idea, Matthew. This is a really good one. I love the possible breakdown we could have in parallel with your fact check sheets. Claim, spin, strategy, actual occurrence outline. Yeah. Yep, that's pretty much the plan. All right. Sorry, clear the throat, get everything all sorted out there. So, flak engine question for you. Where do you draw the line between venue management decision for public safety and an actual free speech issue? Because there were people who were seriously concerned here. And I don't know that there is, I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer on this one. People in the community absolutely had the right to be concerned about the message it sent, about the safe space that they were using. The Free Speech Union knew very well what it was doing because they've done this for years. I think it's 8 years now that they've been going around doing this. And this is very much the original playbook for them. This is, we're going to vilify people saying we can't do anything. Back in 2018, very different set of circumstances, and councillors have learned from that. Council has learned from that. And the processes are there really specifically for that reason. So where is the line? I'd love to hear your feedback on this one. There's some really fascinating stuff in there. We've got ID Levice going, private and peaceful resolution should be attempted via discussion in the first place. Absolutely. And it does seem like that didn't really happen here. And again, I don't know the details. Nobody in the events department at council has told me about this. This is an interesting one as well. I've emailed a complaint about Destiny booking Mount Smart to hold an event just after he said to burn the mosques and all his other racist drivel. I saw them in the news this week as well. That was quite fascinating about the withholding content for them being sued over their cancelling of drag queens and the threats that they've put out there. Idlevice. Oh my God, that makes sense. Idlevice, sick. Okay, I'm sorry. Blame it on sick brain. Sick brain. It's not good. Sashia going, where the free speech is hateful towards a particular group is where I would draw the line. And that's really an interesting one here, because what they're doing is not being hateful towards a particular group. They're being hateful, that they are encouraging people to believe that there is hateful actions going on towards them. They're playing the victim. They want to play the victim, basically, because that gets people along and spends their money. That is a real concern. All right. So what was the outcome? This is what we call the spiral of silence. It's basically when an advocacy group aggressively targets elected representatives like Julie Ferry for attempting standard venue management. It sends this chilling message to local officials, to trans advocates, to the rainbow community, that what they have to say, what they have to deal with, doesn't actually matter because it doesn't fit the narrative that they are putting out there. So everyone else becomes kind of hesitant to raise legitimate venue or safety concerns out of fear of being publicly named and shamed and swarmed. And these are actually some examples of headlines that I've found over the last few years that show this in action. And the big one was actually a BSA decision from the 1st of March 2023. I think it was around the Posey Parker event where she showed up. And yeah, there was some weird stuff going on there at that time. Media coverage of that was really quite fascinating because you had somebody who was very specifically anti-trans, who had neo-Nazis showing up at her events in other parts of the world going, we support this. So they have to be really careful with how they put it out there, because we also have a media that's now scared to give out objective truth. What they do is they have to both sides things. Otherwise, an organization like the Free Speech Union gets really upset at not being platformed and telling people that what's happening is that they're being silenced. So you end up with this really milquetoast kind of media environment where things have to be both-sided, even when it shouldn't. And that silences some people because they don't want to platform the other side. And a lot of that is the case when it comes to how media covers issues like outspoken personalities who are fighting against trans people's identities and a right to exist. So how do you both sides that without putting somebody in harm's way? Best thing to do is not. So you end up with a really loud vocal minority who are overcompensating and taking over that commentary space. And they get fed in places like Facebook and other social media outlets because our algorithms there work on engagement. It doesn't matter if it's good engagement or bad engagement, but rage bait is the way to do that. And that's how these organizations build their following, spread their word. And you'll see it if you're on a comment section, really specifically, that there are going to be people who drink the Kool-Aid. And it doesn't matter how wrong it is and how demonstrably false you can make it and show them everything. They're still going to drink the Kool-Aid. And there are people out there who aren't going to fight back, because when they do, they get piled on, which is what we call that spiral of silence. There's a whole bunch of different media content out there that you can find. Like Free Speech Union goes after New Zealand regulators. Is this culture war or mission creep? Or there was an opinion piece that was done by Dr. Mohan Datta from Massey, I think it was, about the Free Speech Union itself and its leaping to climate surveys and from climate surveys to moral panic. And Mohan is very vocal about these organizations, and they're very vocal about him, and they'll go from vilifying him to let's have a good faith yarn, and him refusing to do it because he knows that it's basically a trap, and because he knows that they're going to sit there and keep trying to run him into the ground or silence him. And it's really fascinating when they do that with academics, because it's kind of like we have this intrinsic trust in doctors. We know they've had years of study and the expertise. Academics are the same. It just might not necessarily be on something that's physically happening to you. But why should somebody at the Free Speech Union feel that they are more qualified to talk about free speech than, say, a communications professor at Massey? There's because they get silenced because the crowd piles up. And that is where it becomes really interesting to sit down and watch all the nuance in there. Oh, throats are like all over the place. Oh, I see. This one, this one here from Vixen, when he was crying on Facebook this morning that he barely got any media time on the coverage of the opening of the Drury train station. It doesn't surprise me. You're going to find actually over the next couple of months that there is 98 days, 97 days, something like that. There's a lot of this kind of stuff with the three coalition parties in particular vying for attention in really specific ways, and how our media deals with that. Might be next week's episode. We'll have to have a look. How media deals with them, because they are responsible for where we are now. They all want to blame the other parties for where we are now and all try and sell themselves as different while saying that the other side is going to work together. It is a really fascinating thing. And for media, it's a really interesting challenge on how do you frame that without it being either clearly biased or not detailed enough. So yeah, I'm really fascinated to see how they're going to do that. It is fascinating. I like this one as well from Edelweiss. Counter right-wing propaganda with the inside skinny. Lies cannot live in the light of truth. I agree to that. I agree with that generally on the whole, but what we have is people who are so in their bubble, they refuse to listen and see the light. And that becomes really problematic. That's part of how we cultivate this. Also, like how that came out going member for 1 month. I like that. If you want to be a member, you can do that quite easily. It's all on the YouTube page. It's super, super simple. Gosh, my throat is starting to really dry out. It's not good. Yeah, so here we go. This is what the spiral of silence is. Basically, if you say anything, you're going to be pounced on. And to be fair, when I was setting up this stream going, okay, I want to talk about the Free Speech Union because of how much they've been in the media this week, there was a thing that popped up in my head going, if they catch wind of this, it's going to be a flood in the comment section of people telling me that I'm wrong, that I don't know what I'm talking about, that I'm vilifying them unfairly, all of that kind of context that they want to give these organizations. And I still can't understand why people simp for these groups. They don't know where the funding comes from, so they don't know exactly what it is that they stand for, but they're registered as third-party promoters with the Electoral Commission, so that they have admitted that they're going to be spending a ton of money to try and influence how people vote, but they don't tell you who it is that you should vote for. They're just going to try and influence you in other ways, like there is. Sorry, I'm doing the fast talky thing again. So anybody watching this on 1.5 speed, I apologize. It's not good. Anyway, let's jump into the next one. Cultivation theory, which is really simple. Continuous media reporting here that frames routine venue reallocation as state censorship actually cultivates this false public consensus that gender-critical views are being illegalized, which feeds into a perpetual sense of grievance. And that's not what's happening here. There are some people in the community who are really upset about the message that they sent about this venue being booked by someone who has very much said that they do not believe in the rights of these people. That's understandably problematic. But they're going to have a villain. Must have a villain. All right. So what's the outcome? People get silenced. And that's not good. That's not good. So Edelweiss, not really talking about telling the truth to FSU assholes. They're lost to us. No, the truth is being spoken past them to a greater audience. I certainly hope that's the case. We are going to, we're going to see. We got time. We got plenty of time, hopefully. But yeah, the audience out there is, I think, wanting the truth more than anything else. All right, have I got any more slides? One more slide. No, this is the last slide. This is the last slide. What do you know? So I got many, many notes. All right, so what I'm hoping that you've noticed is, well, you've seen some of the tools that help you recognize what we call structural flack. It's basically when news outlets get targeted within hours for asking what we would consider standard questions about government appointees. It's this calculated tactic that's designed to deter. Oh my God. To stop investigative reporting. And again, because we have this media that's set up to both sides things, putting out that question that targets whether or not this is a valid question to ask means that it's going to get the coverage, which means that there are going to get people there going, this is, I'm just going to raise this one up here very quickly about VIX. The number of bots and comment sections is certainly starting to, yeah, absolutely right. My Substack newsletter, which comes out, I do 2 a week. One's like a Tuesday night, this is what's happened in the election campaign, and one's a Friday, Sunday deep dive. The next one is actually on the increase of bots that we're seeing. It's done on the back of a whole bunch of research that's gone through Australian media about the same thing happening with their elections, focusing really specifically on specific voter groups who support specific candidates for certain reasons and what makes them easy targets and stuff like that. So you're not wrong. Talking to a number of content creators over the last couple of days, particularly on the left, we're seeing a lot of this around New Zealand First in particular, bots coming in who drag people away. What they do is they'll make a comment that's kind of inflammatory. People who support that party will go and look at their content and it'll take them to something like a pink slime news site, which is AI news that's mass generated, that's there for engagement and clicks. And the people that are running that make significant amounts of money. I think it's the New Zealand brand page that's got a lot of followers, which is it's so lazy. They take real news that real journalists have done, run it through an AI so it doesn't hit copyright content, run the pictures through sometimes and end up with the worst looking things. And it's just about engagement. Ask something, frame something that gets people angry. One of them based here in New Zealand is making 6 figures a month at the moment. And that's how they pull you. And then, as I noticed this week as well, you'll end up getting people going, hey, why don't you be friends? Because you're liking everything that I have on this page. And then suddenly they offer you things like a lucrative business opportunity, which I had with my account this week on TikTok. Somebody decided to clone me and started reaching out to people going, hey, this is the real me, which it wasn't. Can you please give me money, which you never should do in that respect. Like, it's just, yeah, it's not good. The bot system is going hard at the moment because the election is coming up, and because we have such partisan spaces online, it is a really easy target to pull people in. They earn money through their pink slime sites that they've created, and then they might be able to get more money from people because they're suddenly going, we like the same things, and oh no, suddenly sad things have happened, we should give you money. So yeah, it is. It's not good. It's really not good. Let's go take that one down. Yeah. Oh, the throat. Yeah. Yep. Asking for money is definitely bad. And I really hope that they don't. For next week's newsletter, feel free to share it when it comes out to everybody on the Sunday, because hopefully it's got some tips in there about how to avoid this and stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah. This is, thanks for this week, RNZ. When you do a search for me on TikTok, apparently this group's coming out. They had 11,000 followers. They managed to publish in a day something like 27 of my videos. I complained to Facebook because they blocked me. I complained to TikTok. They blocked me. And so I can't report directly through the page saying, hey, this is somebody copying me. I reported it through the security options in the back end, and they've messaged me now, like TikTok's messaged me a couple of times going, hey, fake user, like calling me by the name of the fake user's handle. And it was like, I don't know whether or not you're fixing things. I don't know if you're getting things sorted. And then they sent me one last night going, yes, Elspeth, I do. I've got one waiting for me in the kitchen. I'll have after this. But yeah, the TikTok's like, hey, we've sorted everything out now, and they've done nothing. But I was getting messages from people going, oh, they're asking for money. They're claiming that they're the real you. And like, it's not. If you want a really simple tip on how to deal with somebody like that, because they generally come from specific parts like Bangladesh, Thailand, places that have the ability to monetize and the manpower to be able to monitor these things on a fairly large scale, and the regulations to be able to get away with it. Ask them a really simple question like kei te pihe koe. Throw something at them in Te Reo Māori. And to be fair, I'm not overly fluent in it myself, but there are some things I know how to respond to, like that, that would throw them. So if you're really concerned, or reach out to the other accounts. I've tried to get a blue tick just to say, yes, I am me. And, I'm not famous so I don't get one, but it happens. Yeah. Anyway. I do like this one. I suppose it's a positive sign. Somebody said to me the sincerest form of flattery is imitation. And it might be. Doesn't feel particularly flattering, but it might be. We'll see. All right. So, as I said, what I'm hoping people got this week, let's take this one out. Big old full screen. What I'm hoping people get this is that news outlets being targeted within a few hours of asking what we consider standard questions is really problematic. We expect our media to be able to do its job and to hold power to account. And when you've got somebody running point that's stopping that becomes really problematic. Look at the details that get stripped away in press releases, hiding things like community safety concerns that we saw in the case with Julie Ferry, where they can manufacture a censorious politician. They can create a villain, basically, and villains sell. They need a really good villain, though, like, Ursula the Sea Witch or Jafar, somebody who breaks into song. Because if they don't, people don't buy it. And what they've done with Julie in particular is gone, here is somebody leftist trying to cancel us. And to their right-wingers who are rage-baited so easily and don't seem to have that critical thinking skill set to be able to go, wait a second, it's like catnip. So what we need to do is start watching how an organization is pivoting from defending free expression on a campus, for example, to securing appointments on medical regulatory bodies, which fundamentally shifts its role from civil society group to political influence network. That's what we've got with the Free Speech Union at the moment. It is a political influence network. We can see that in the number of appointments that they've had over the last 3 years. And the fact that the Free Speech Union was set up by somebody who is our current race relations commissioner is a concern. The fact that it is part of this campaign company stable of titles like the Taxpayers Union or the Auckland Ratepayers Alliance or the Sensible Sentencing Trust, it is clearly part of a bigger machine that is designed to go out and run point. And we know that that organization was set up by Jordan Williams. Jordan Williams actually trained under Stephen Franks, who's a former ACT Party MP, who's also the lawyer that you'll see has done things like told Kaipara District Council that it was fine for them to ignore Te Tiriti in a report that they had done up specifically so that they could cut ties with Māori. Or he was the one who sent out preemptive new cease and desist orders to people working in trans healthcare, going, you're going to be sued for this, which I think, if I remember correctly, the Law Society turned around and says, that's fine. And that's a real problem. Like that kind of running point is a real problem. So that's where we're at. And it's entirely up to you if you want to trust what the Free Speech Union has to say, if you want to take it on board, or if you'd rather just ignore it completely. But one thing I would suggest, if you haven't done so already, make sure that your algorithms are tuned properly. And if you don't want to get content from them, block them. It's as simple as that. If you come across something that's demonstrably false or misleading, it's probably not going to do much to report it other than tell the algorithm that it should be concerned. The more people who report these things, the less likely it is that it's going to be spread super far. But we do, yes, the false speech union. That's a great way to look at the FSU. I would love some ideas as to other topics you'd like me to cover in the upcoming weeks, hopefully with a better sounding throat. Those emotes, by the way, those emotes that he's talking about, which I can't put up on screen because I don't think they show on here. This is what they show up to me in my thing. These are emotes that are exclusively available to paid members on YouTube. You can access them by becoming a paid member. There's a couple of different tiers. There's conversation things in there. Feel free to do that. Feel free to come along and join. There's some regular content that comes out specifically just for paid members, like Missing Bits, where I show you behind the scenes, or I think last week we did some previews for the next collective documentary thing that I'm working on around tourism. So yeah, it's all there if you want to come along and join, and I'd appreciate the support. Always helps to make sure that things can be paid for, like StreamYard, which I use for this. I think that's me done. Hopefully you guys learned something. I hope you learned something. But yeah, I would love to get some feedback from people on what other sort of topics you'd like to look at. Normally my plan was to go, hey, what is the big news story? What's the big overarching thing that's happening in the news? And go from there. So please feel free to drop me a line, info@paultheotherone.com. Head along to the website election2026.co.nz to get a whole bunch of information around this year's election. Very quick reminder as well, you only have 4 days if you whakapapa Māori to decide between the Māori role or the general role. And you get to vote either way, but if you want to be on the Māori role, you need to make your decision before August 6th. That's our cutoff day for it. So make sure that you have got your mind made up on that one. And you need to make sure your details are up to date by October 25 this year, Labor Day, to vote in this year's election. Media is only just starting to pick up on the fact that voting period, the early voting period, there is no updates to the electoral roll. So you can't even go in and update your details if you move to go and vote in a few days. Once we hit that early voting period, there are no updates. And if you are not enrolled to vote at where you are, it's a mess. It's a deliberate mess. So that is, Oh, I like this topic. Edelweiss has a great one here. Why do so many people feel financially squeezed if headline economic indicators are improving? I can give you this one as a shorthand, actually. It is because those improving economic indicators, including things like business confidence, is things are going to get better. business confidence is confidence things are going to improve. And when you're at rock bottom, that's kind of how it goes. There's only one way but up until you realize that you can dig through the rock. How does that work in a snap election? So in a snap election, you're fucked. I know it's the same rules. If you have a snap election, and to be fair, the fastest that we've ever been able to put forward a snap election is 28 days. In that early voting period, you would not be able to vote if your details aren't up to date. So you would have essentially 10 days to get your details up to date, which means the Electoral Commission would be flooded, which causes a whole bunch of other issues as well. That's part of the reason I think why we're not going to see Chris Luxon fire Winston Peters, because a snap election doesn't look good, but also there's right now they're doing so poorly in the polls that a snap election would not bode well for National, and especially one that's caused by the mess that is the coalition, and because of the changes that they've put in place, it's going to limit even more people from voting. So yeah, a snap election would not be good. So if you are moving, update your details the day you move, if you can. And if you turn 18 in that early voting period, you can pre-enroll beforehand. You just go to vote.nz to do that. So it is really simple to do. It takes 2 minutes to check. They did message me this week and say, please tell people to make sure that they are putting in their exact details. So you might need to check, say, middle names, for example, for that kind of thing to make sure it works. All right. What else we got here? Bibliosphere. I heard in a podcast with Toby Manhire and Andrew Geddes, you can enroll after the cutoff date, like you can rock up and fill out the form, but your vote won't be counted unless you enrolled before October 25. Yeah. Yep. And we want everyone's vote to be counted. Should we introduce majority voting mandate for health and education? That could be an interesting one to see how that works. All right. Voter suppression, it certainly is. Yep. That's exactly what this is, voter suppression. But they won't say that. They won't use those terms. Right, I'm going to sign off. I'm going to go and have some lemon and honey. Like I said, I hope you guys learned something. This will be released as a podcast tomorrow morning on all podcast platforms. Feel free to jump on there. This week, the podcast awards open as well. So I'm going to be asking you guys to support me again. I think I came third last year in People's Choice. My aim is second this year. So I need to put together the things for that particular nomination. But I will deal with that when I can get my throat better. Until next time, guys, ka kite anō. Look after yourselves. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. I hope it is as sunny where you are as it is here, but much, much warmer. All right. See you all.